Hey y'all, I'm Rachel Martine, also known as Teacher Rachel and VIP Kid, and Mrs. Niece in the art classroom. Today we are focusing on the art classroom. I'm going to be showing you my idea that actually ended up working with tempera paint using, of all things, makeup and chalk and other pigments that you can find really easily, really cheaply, and aren't toxic for middle schoolers or high schoolers that you are working with. Now, this idea came when I was teaching a art history with art class. We were covering the Renaissance. We were looking at a lot of paintings that were done in egg tempera. And this is kind of boring for a bunch of 15, 16, 17 year olds. So I'm looking around and I realize I've got a class full of girls. We only had a couple boys in the class. Now, what is something that girls really like at that age? It's makeup. What is egg tempera part of? It is eggs and pigment. Makeup is pigment. So I got this idea going, and my first class, they will know who they are. They were my guinea pigs, and they really helped me out. We got some chalk, we got some makeup. They brought in old makeup. I went to the dollar store and just got a bunch of powdered makeup. You want powdered eyeshadow, powders, pigments. The cream stuff, not gonna work. And we ended up creating our own egg tempera paintings. So I'm going to go get my husband, go set up, show you what you need, and show you how this actually works. I'll see you in a bit. Supplies you are going to need. First thing, always protect your workspace. Just get cheap tablecloths, plastic tablecloths from the dollar store. Those work just fine. Trash bags. You know what you're doing if you're protecting your space. The next thing you need are, of course, your eggs. It will not be the egg white, it'll be the yolk, and actually not even the sack the yolk comes in, and I'll show you in a bit how to get that. You're going to need some water to mix in with your yolk. Regular tap water works just fine. You're going to need a container for your eggs, something to put your eggs in, just a plastic jar, glass jar if you trust it not falling, something to put that egg yolk and that water in. You can keep this mixture for about 2 days before it starts getting smelly. Just keep it in the refrigerator when you're not using it. You are also going to need, of course, your paint brushes. I find the smaller paintbrushes tend to work better when you're working with egg tempera. So smaller paintbrushes. Don't use those plastic paintbrushes. Those don't normally work for anything. You're also going to need palette knives. These will be helpful when you're shaving down your pigments, crushing up your pigments, mixing your paint. Palette knives, always a good idea to have on hand. If you have a mortar and pestle, that'll help, but I don't have one of those. You're also going to want a pipette or some kind of syringe. We have a little syringe from dog medicine. This will help kind of soak up egg yolk if you need it. Switch paint around. It's a good thing to have on file. You're also going to need paint palettes, something to keep your paint on. If you're in the classroom, you probably have paint palettes. I like to keep the lids to things. They have a little bit of a lip. My egg yolk's not going to go anywhere. When I'm done, I can toss them. I don't have to worry about washing them. You're also, of course, going to need a pencil. This will help you draw out when you're planning your final thing to paint. You're going to need your pigments. Now remember, I said no cream pigments. Those aren't going to work. So when you're getting makeup or kids are bringing in old makeup, don't let them bring in their new stuff. Old makeup, you want the powdered pigments. You can also use colored chalk or chalk pastels. These are pretty easy to use as well. You're going to need paper towels to clean your space. You know, if you have those Lysol wipes, those are always good, but paper towels are good to keep on by in case there's a spill, you need to wipe your hands. You know, classic art room supplies. You're also going to need what you're painting on. Now, some people will paint on foam core, other people will paint on paper. I like to have some kind of watercolor paper, mixed media paper on hand so you can kind of see what colors you're mixing up, get an idea before you put it on your final thing. And I had the kids painting on canvas. You can find flat canvases, big canvases, whatever you have. Today I'm going to use these small canvases. And you can also try to keep it close to the original paint on wood. I actually got this wood panel at the dollar store. Now, if you are using wood or canvas, you need to seal your canvas. So you need gesso or the trick I used in undergraduate, house paint. House paint kilns, that's also a great alternative to gessoing. For this project, you can also even use acrylic paint to just seal that canvas, get rid of that canvas texture if that's what you're looking to get rid of. But it also helps seal the canvas or the wood. Back during the Renaissance and the Middle Ages, they had to use gesso, which is a plaster, a liquid plaster. And then it dries hard and they can paint on it, but it keeps the paints. Linseed oil and oil paints especially will rot your canvas or your wood. So let's keep our art for a little while. Now, the next step is getting the egg yolk out of our egg. So join me in the kitchen. We'll get that egg yolk out. Okay, so your first step is to get the yolk out of the egg and out of the egg sac. Now, I've been told that the fresher the egg is, the better it works. These have been in my fridge for about a week, so we'll see how this works. So, of course, you need something to put the egg yolk in. Also, definitely something to catch your egg whites. I personally didn't want my kids really messing with this. I showed them the first time, the first day we started, I showed them how to do it, but then I just kind of prepped it before class. It's a little easier to do it myself than worry about, you know, them working with as much raw egg as possible. We don't we don't want any nasty salmonella. So, of course, first thing, crack your egg. And you want to separate the egg yolk from the egg whites. So it will take a minute. Be patient. You know, if you're a baker, you kind of know this process. If you're not a baker, it might take a minute. You might go through a couple eggs. So go ahead and you can actually get the egg yolk in your hand. You want to kind of try to get some of the egg white off if you can. And the thing with it being a fresher egg is the egg sac's going to be a little stronger for this process. It won't break as easily. So what you can do is you can kind of roll it between your hands. It's going to be icky. It's going to be kind of slimy and gross. You know, some of your kids will get a kick out of it. Some of your students won't want to touch it. So just kind of roll it back and forth, dry your hands on a paper towel between. You kind of see there's more ickiness coming off. So, and you can discard that. I'm at home, so I'll probably give some of that to the dogs. It helps their coats. But, so I've got my egg yolk. What the next thing is, now that it's kind of a little less covered in the white stuff, you're going to poke a hole. You can use a toothpick. I'm just using the palette knife. And you want to puncture it and get the egg yolk into the jar without getting the little sack in there. Again, it'll take a minute. Let gravity do its job. And I think I'm probably going to do 2 eggs for this today. Just depends on how big your class is, how long, you know, you're willing to work that day. Now, as you can see, there's the sack that the egg yolk came out of. Definitely, you don't want this part, just the stuff that's in it. Now, I'm going to go clean up, go back to the table, and start getting things together. So we'll see in just a little bit. Back at the table, I now have out my canvases. It's what I'm going to use today. And like I said, you need to prime this. So I'm just going to use acrylic because it's quick, it's easy, and it'll be good for this process. So remember, if you are teaching, get your kids to write their name. You know, you're always going to have at least one that doesn't have a name on it, and you're going to be asking whose painting it is. You're going to have to remember. It's a little harder when you're looking at classes of 20 plus. So write your name on it, get out an old paintbrush, go ahead and prime that thing. We'll come back when it's dry. Now I have my canvas primed. I just used acrylic paint again, and I did hit it with the blow dryer to speed up the time for the purposes of the video, but you definitely don't have to do that. But you do have to write your name if you're a student. So you can kind of tell a little bit. It's not going to show up great because they are white. But this one is primed. This one is not. This one is ready to work on. So you can go ahead, grab your pencil, draw out your design. I suggest keeping it pretty simple, especially the first few times you do this. It's going to take a minute to get used to it. Egg tempera dries very fast, very quickly. Artists during the Renaissance time were actually known to use a paintbrush with one bristle, one little hair on it, and do a lot of hatching and building up of color to get their desired effect. So that may or may not work for your class. It depends, you know, how patient they are. So I'm going to go ahead. It's spooky season. I'm going to draw a little pumpkin, and then I'm going to get the egg yolk, the water, and the pigment out and start painting. Now that my paint is dry for my sealing of the canvas, I did just take my pencil and draw out a little pumpkin. Again, it's spooky season. It's almost Halloween, so we're getting in the mood. The next thing I'm going to need is definitely my egg yolk. And you are going to want to add some water. You want it watered down. I know people that really do this professionally. They even mix in a little malt vinegar, like just a drop. We don't need that for this process, not in the classroom. So you kind of want 2-part egg to 1-part water. Does not have to be exact. You can go ahead, stir that up. You want it definitely more liquidy than the egg yolk itself. Kind of gets like a white consistency to it. This is where that syringe is going to come in handy, especially if you are helping your students out. And the next thing that you're going to want to get is your pigments. So I found it easier to actually get the students to go ahead and break up their pigments first, kind of get a good little grouping ready, but it is something you could do on the spot too if you wanted to. So of course my pumpkin's going to be orange. You do want to work from darker to lighter with this. You're going to have to layer your paint. You can't get in there and mix it. It's all going to be dried. Okay, so I've moved the camera down a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. I have my palette here. I've got my chalk pastel, the orange for the pumpkin, and I'm just going to take the side of my palette knife and kind of run it down the chalk pastel and start getting a dusting. So this is where that pigment is coming from. And our dog is going a little nuts. As you can tell, actually shaving down the pigments or breaking them up does take a little bit longer. That's why you want to maybe do that first and put them aside before you get your egg yolk and everything ready. I've done 2 different shades of orange. So I'm going to add my egg yolk water mixture. That is where the syringe can definitely come in handy. If I can get it going, let's see. There we go. And I'm going to add some egg yolk. You know, the more pigment, less egg yolk and water, the brighter the color will be. But you'll have more paint with more egg yolk. So that's just going to be trial and error. And I'm sure different people will experience different things and, you know, pick the things they like better. And, you know, you get egg yolk somewhere, just wipe it up. Not a big deal. Again, you can mix with your paintbrush or with the palette knife. Either one works. So you're going to mix them up, get your paint consistency. It'll probably be more the consistency of a watercolor than an oil paint or an acrylic is what you're going to end up with. And they do tend to be translucent. Again, that is why we are layering. It takes lots and lots of layers. When you see egg tempera, it took someone some time. If it is an older painting, they probably had a workshop full of apprentices that did a majority of the prep for painting. If you really want to make this authentic, get some seashells. They used to mix the pigments in the egg yolk, also other paints in eggshells. Apparently it helped the process. It's not really going to help us today, but it's something to add authenticness, if that's a word, to your art. So again, I got a scrap piece of thicker paper here, so I can kind of take a look at how my colors will turn out when I get them on the canvas. Do a couple layers. Again, this stuff dries pretty quickly. If you're really working for a long time, it might even dry on your brush, but because it is egg, it does clean up with soap and water again, warm water. And here we go. Don't know if you can hear, but the ice cream truck's going by. Maybe I should have drawn an ice cream. To take a look, you can see that's the lighter orange, the darker orange. Probably going to go with the darker orange, maybe add in some browns to do the painting. And let's see, which brush did I use? Whew. Going to add my first layer. Again, lots of layers. This takes a lot of time and patience. I believe it took my class about 2 weeks for everybody to completely finish theirs. And we did it on, I believe, 8 by 10 canvases. I believe that's the size we used. So you can tell I've started putting my pumpkin together. Layer 1. I'm going to keep working and I'll come back once I have a couple layers. That way you can see the process. Okay, so I have now mixed up some eyeshadow brown and some eyeshadow green for my pumpkin. You can tell they are opaque the first few layers. You've got to keep adding, but when I was saying build up your colors, you really do. Even your shading needs to be built. So I've gone in with some brown for where my pumpkin needs to be darker, and I'll keep layering and we'll see how it turns out. Let's keep going.